Welcome to Japanese Sleep Whispers, your sanctuary for peaceful nights and gentle dreams. Here, you will find calming bedtime stories inspired by the timeless beauty and traditions of Japan. Each story is read slowly in a soothing voice, accompanied by natural sounds such as flowing rivers and the tranquil rhythm of shishi-odoshi. Whether you seek relaxation, relief from stress, or help falling asleep, these tales invite you to drift away into a world of serenity. Imagine quiet temples, moonlit gardens, and the whispering bamboo forests as you listen. If you'd like these soothing stories to be part of your nightly routine, consider subscribing so they're always with you when you need them. Subscribe and let these stories be your nightly ritual of calm and rest. Thank you for being here. May you always find peace in every moment. The Sparrow's Shadow at Dusk. Prologue. The Whisper of Dusk. The village lay cradled between two gentle hills, where rice paddies mirrored the sky like silver mirrors. In the late afternoon, when the sun began its slow descent, the air filled with a soft, trembling light the color of amber and quiet memory. Haru stood at the edge of the paddy, watching sparrows dart among the stalks. Their wings flickered like shadows against the water's surface, swift and silent, yet entirely alive. He had always loved this time of day, when the village seemed suspended between light and darkness. And even the simplest movements felt like part of a larger rhythm. Elder Kaoru approached, leaning lightly on his staff. "Do you see the shadows, Haru?" he asked. Haru tilted his head. "The sparrows?" "Yes," Kaoru replied. "But more than that. The shadows of all who have walked here, the farmers, the children, the monks. They move alongside the living. Only those who listen carefully can hear their song." Haru knelt by the water, letting his reflection merge with the mirrored sky. A faint chill drifted in the evening breeze. Somewhere, a bell tolled from the distant temple, low and deliberate. It seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of the village itself. "You must learn to walk with the shadows," Kaoru whispered. "To see them not as absence, but as presence. Only then will you understand the song of dusk." Haru closed his eyes, feeling the subtle stir of life all around him, the rustle of rice stalks, the flit of wings, the distant murmur of water. The world seemed to pause, poised on the edge of night and light, shadow and being. And in that quiet, he heard it, a faint, persistent whisper, neither human nor bird, neither wind nor water, but something that belonged to the space between. The sparrow's shadow had begun to move, dancing across the paddy, leading him into a journey he had not yet imagined. Chapter 1. The Path of Shadows. As dusk deepened, Haru followed the sparrow through narrow paths between the paddies. Shadows lengthened, stretching across the ground like ink on silk. The village lights had not yet come on, only the final glow of sunset guided him. Elder Kaoru's voice lingered in his mind. "Walk with the shadows. Listen to the song of the unseen." The sparrow paused on a low branch beside a small grove of pines, its dark eyes reflecting the fading light. Haru crouched nearby, studying the subtle movements of the bird. Every flutter seemed deliberate, every tilt a signal. He realized that the shadows were not simply the absence of light, they carried intent, memory, and rhythm. A breeze rustled the pine needles, and he sensed the grove itself was alive. Whispering stories from decades past, monks walking the temple steps, villagers tending the fields, children laughing along stone bridges. Haru lifted a small lantern he carried, its flame trembling like a heartbeat. The shadows recoiled, then intertwined with the light, forming a delicate pattern across the mossy stones. It was as if the sparrow and the lantern were conducting an invisible orchestra. The path led to a hidden shrine, tucked behind bamboo and pines. Here, the air was still, and the shadows pooled around the stone steps. Haru knelt, placing the lantern carefully. The reflection in the shallow basin revealed not only his own face but faint, fleeting images of those who had once visited this place. "The shadows carry memory," he whispered. "They preserve the life of the village, even in silence." From the depths of the grove, a voice soft and resonant seemed to answer, "And now you walk with us, Haru." Haru exhaled slowly, feeling a warmth spread through him. The journey had begun, not toward distant lands or adventure, but into the subtle world of light and shadow, memory and presence. Here, in the quiet of dusk, the sparrow's shadow was no longer simply a bird, it was a guide. A teacher, and a reminder that even the smallest being can illuminate the path to understanding. Chapter 2: Whispers of the Temple. The next morning, Haru awoke to a soft mist hovering over the village. The rice paddies glimmered like silver, and the lanterns he had placed the night before reflected in the water with gentle clarity. The sparrow's shadow flitted across the mist, leading him toward the temple nestled at the edge of the pine grove. Elder Kaoru awaited at the steps. "Today, you will learn to hear more than the wind," he said. The temple remembers. Its stones, its bell, even the moss carry stories. Watch carefully, and you may see the unseen. Haru followed him into the temple courtyard. Light filtered through the pines, casting long shadows that shifted with every movement. He knelt before the central stone, running his fingers over its smooth surface. Embedded in the stone were faint inscriptions, names, dates, small carvings that had endured generations. "Each shadow you see," Kaoru explained, "carries a memory. Some are joyous, some sorrowful, but all are part of the song of this place. Learn to move among them without disturbing their harmony." Haru closed his eyes, listening. The distant toll of the bell harmonized with the rustle of pine needles, the flow of water, and the faint movements of the sparrows. Slowly, he felt a rhythm emerging, a pulse connecting him to the living and the departed alike. Chapter 3: The Hidden Grove. Later that day, the sparrow led Haru deeper into the grove, beyond the main paths and into a secluded clearing, where a small stone shrine stood, almost swallowed by bamboo and ferns. The air here was cooler, filled with the subtle fragrance of pine and earth. Haru knelt before the shrine, placing his lantern carefully on the stone steps. Its light cast elongated shadows, and for a moment, he thought he saw figures moving within the darkness, shapes of villagers, monks, and children long gone. A breeze whispered through the bamboo, carrying soft voices. One voice said, "Balance is fragile. Disturb it, and all light falters." Haru understood that this grove was a living memory. Every stone, every leaf, every shadow preserved the essence of those who had walked here before. To care for it, he realized, was to honor both the living and the departed. The first trial came unexpectedly. A small portion of the stone steps had loosened, threatening to collapse. Haru worked carefully, using his hands and simple tools to stabilize the stones. The sparrow watched silently, flitting from branch to branch. With each careful adjustment, the shadows seemed to settle, as if acknowledging his effort. By nightfall, the shrine was secure. Haru lit the lantern again, and its glow mingled with the reflections in the nearby water basin. The shadows moved gently around him, no longer threatening, but protective. As if guiding him toward understanding the deeper harmony between light, shadow, and human care. Haru felt a quiet exhilaration. This was not a battle, nor a test of strength, but of patience, attentiveness, and respect. The first lesson had been learned: to walk in harmony with shadows. One must move slowly, listen carefully, and honor all that came before. Chapter 4: Echoes in the Village. The following days carried Haru back into the heart of the village. The air was filled with the aroma of roasted chestnuts, the chatter of children playing near the stream, and the rhythmic sound of pestles pounding rice for mochi. Everywhere he walked, the sparrow's shadow followed silently, alighting on eaves and rooftops as if keeping watch. Elder Kaoru had given him a task: walk among the people. Do not speak of shadows. Instead, listen, and observe how light falls upon their lives. So Haru listened. He saw the fisherman at the river bank, patiently mending his net while the lantern light reflected on the water. He saw the old weaver at her loom, her hands weaving not just cloth but the memories of her ancestors into every pattern. He saw children chasing fireflies, their laughter filling the evening like bells. Yet in each household, Haru noticed something subtle: an unspoken weariness, as if a hidden thread of sorrow bound the villagers. It was in the way a mother lingered at the shrine longer than her prayer required. Or how the farmer paused at the edge of his field at twilight, staring into the horizon with silent resignation. That night, Haru returned to the stone bridge. Lanterns floated on the river again, their flames trembling in the evening wind. As he watched, the sparrow's shadow grew longer, stretching across the bridge stones until it touched his own feet. In that moment, Haru felt the weight of their unspoken grief: the losses of past winters, the memories of storms, and the longing for departed loved ones. "Can shadows hold sorrow?" Haru whispered. The sparrow tilted its head, as if answering silently they can, and they do. But they can also carry healing, if you listen. Chapter 5 The Sparrow's Gift. The next morning, a young girl named Aki approached Haru near the temple steps. She was carrying a small wooden box wrapped in faded cloth. "My grandmother says you can listen to shadows," she said shyly. "Can you help us?" Haru hesitated, remembering Kaoru's instruction not to reveal his task too soon. But the sincerity in Aki's eyes compelled him to follow. She led him to her family's house near the grove. Inside, her grandmother sat silently before the kamedana, the household shrine. The air was heavy with incense, and beside the shrine lay the wooden box. When Haru knelt before it, the sparrow's shadow fluttered across the tatami mats, settling on the box. Haru slowly unwrapped it, revealing an old bronze mirror, its surface clouded with age. At first, it reflected nothing but the dim lantern glow. Then, as Haru tilted it, he saw faint outlines, shadows of faces, children running, a man with kind eyes. The images wavered like ripples in water. Aki gasped. "That's my father." Her grandmother closed her eyes, tears falling silently. "He was taken by the river 3 winters ago. We never saw him again." The mirror pulsed faintly in Haru's hands. The sparrow's shadow expanded across its surface, and in the flickering light, the faces seemed to bow gently, as if acknowledging the family. Haru spoke softly. "He is not gone. His shadow lives here, woven into your home, your prayers, your memories. He waits each night, in silence, with love." For the first time in years, Aki's grandmother smiled faintly. She lit a fresh stick of incense and whispered a prayer. The heaviness in the room seemed to lift, replaced by a stillness that was not empty but full of presence. As Haru left the house, the sparrow perched on his shoulder. He realized that this was the gift of the shadows, not to frighten or sadden, but to remind the living that they are never truly alone. Chapter 6 Whispers of a Coming Storm. Autumn deepened, and with it came uneasy whispers carried on the mountain wind. The villagers spoke of strange occurrences, tools vanishing from fields, livestock startled at night, and shadows stretching unnaturally long even when the lanterns burned brightly. One evening, as Haru sat with Elder Kaoru beneath the great cedar, the sparrow's shadow suddenly trembled. The small bird itself darted toward the temple wall, wings beating frantically, as though warning of an unseen presence. Kaoru's face grew grave. The boundary between the seen and unseen is thinning. "Do you feel it, Haru?" Haru nodded. The air itself felt heavier, as though a veil of unseen mist lay across the village. Every sound, the rustle of bamboo, the drip of water from mossy eaves, echoed with an unnatural weight. That night, Haru dreamt of the river overflowing, lanterns extinguished by unseen hands, and shadows swarming like waves across the fields. He awoke with his heart pounding, the sparrow perched quietly on his chest. The next day, a messenger rushed into the village. The northern shrine has been defiled. Offerings scattered, and the guardian statues cracked. The villagers murmured in fear. Such a desecration had not occurred for generations. Kaoru turned to Haru. The shadows you have been called to serve are stirring. Now, you must decide whether you will face them. Chapter 7 The First Unveiling. That evening, the villagers gathered at the stone bridge, where the river glowed faintly in the lantern light. Fear rippled through the crowd. Children clung to their mothers, and men stood with unease in their eyes. Then, without warning, a gust of wind swept through. Lanterns flickered wildly, and their flames dimmed until only faint glows remained. In the dimness, the shadows on the bridge lengthened and began to twist, forming indistinct shapes, half human, half formless voids. Gasps rose from the villagers. Some turned to flee, but Kaoru's voice rang out, "Stand firm. Watch, and do not despair." Haru stepped forward, his knees trembling but his resolve firm. The sparrow soared upward, its shadow stretching wide across the bridge. In its wake, Haru felt a force well within him, not his own yet deeply familiar. He raised his hands slowly, palms open. The twisting shadows writhed, then paused, as if acknowledging the sparrow's dark wings. A silence fell over the bridge, broken only by the river's steady murmur. In that silence, Haru spoke not loudly, but with words that seemed to flow through him rather than from him. "You are not forgotten. You are fragments of what was, seeking rest. Return to the stillness that awaits you." At his words, the shadows faltered. Their formless shapes shimmered, then dissolved into the lantern light, merging with the river's reflection until only ripples remained. A stunned hush fell over the villagers. Then, slowly, one by one, they bowed their heads. Some whispered prayers. Others wept quietly. Kaoru placed a hand on Haru's shoulder. "Tonight, you have shown them. Shadows are not curses, they are memories, asking to be seen." The sparrow circled once above, then alighted on the temple roof, its tiny form silhouetted against the moon. Haru, trembling from exhaustion yet filled with a strange calm, knew that his path had only begun. Chapter 8 Lanterns of Trust. After the night on the bridge, the village seemed to breathe differently. Where once there had been whispers of unease, now there were murmurs of reverence. Children no longer avoided Haru but instead followed him, eager to watch the sparrow that always perched nearby. Farmers greeted him warmly, and the weaver brought him a scarf dyed in autumn hues, to keep the chill of shadows away. The villagers began lighting lanterns not just at the shrine, but along the narrow paths between houses, and even in their fields. "The shadows can be guided," they said, "if we walk with light." One evening, Haru was invited into the home of a fisherman whose wife had passed years before. The man sat by the hearth, his face lined by both laughter and sorrow. "Last night," the fisherman said softly, "I dreamt of her. She stood by the river, smiling, not in pain but at peace. I believe it was because of you." Haru shook his head. "Not me. The shadows wish only to be seen. I am just their voice." Yet in his heart, he felt a quiet warmth. For the first time, he sensed that his journey was not only about confronting darkness, but about weaving bonds of remembrance between the living and the departed. Still, beneath the growing trust, Haru felt the stirring of unease. The sparrow often grew restless, wings twitching in the night. Its shadow, once small and clear, now stretched wider, at times flickering with shapes he could not recognize. Chapter 9: The Shadow Beyond the Pines. The warning came with the first frost. A hunter from the northern hills staggered into the village, his clothes torn, his face pale. "In the pines," he gasped, "there is a shadow that does not fade with dawn. It grows and it follows." The villagers listened in fearful silence. Haru exchanged a glance with Kaoru, who closed his eyes gravely. That night, Haru walked to the edge of the pine forest. The moon hung low, silver light tracing the frost along the branches. Yet beyond the first row of trees, darkness thickened unnaturally. It was not the shadow of night but something heavier, pressing against the senses. The sparrow flew ahead, vanishing into the gloom. Its shadow wavered violently on the ground, as though resisting an unseen current. Then Haru heard it a low whisper, rising like the wind through dead leaves. At first, it was formless, but slowly words took shape. "Why do you disturb our silence? Why call us forth, when forgetting is kinder?" The air grew colder. Frost crackled along the stones at Haru's feet. Within the pines, something vast moved, a darkness with no clear form, shifting like smoke yet heavy as stone. Haru's breath caught. This was no simple memory. It was the gathered weight of unspoken grief, not of one soul but of many. Soldiers lost to forgotten wars, travelers who perished in storms, wanderers who never found home, all bound together in the pines. The shadow surged forward, and the lantern Haru carried flickered. For the first time, he felt fear so strong that his knees weakened. But then, above him, the sparrow cried sharply. Its call was small, almost fragile, yet it cut through the whispering gloom. Haru steadied himself, clutching the lantern close. "I do not come to disturb you," he said, voice trembling yet firm. "I come to remember. If silence is your wish, I will honor it, but your sorrow should not consume the living." The vast shadow paused, as though listening. Its form swayed, then retreated slightly into the pines, leaving the lantern's glow unbroken. Haru exhaled shakily, knowing this was only the beginning. The shadow beyond the pines would not yield easily. Chapter 10: Frost Over the Fields. The frost deepened across the fields, silvering every stalk and stone. Yet it was not the season alone that chilled the village. Each dawn, the farmers found footprints in the frost, shapes too large for foxes, too heavy for deer. They led from the pine grove into the fields, but never back again. Children woke crying from dreams of dark forests. Livestock refused to graze near the northern paths. And every night, lantern flames quivered as if pressed by unseen hands. One evening, Haru gathered with Kaoru and the village elders. The room was dimly lit, shadows long against the paper walls. "The shadow grows bolder," Kaoru said gravely. "If left unchecked, it will spread across the fields, draining the spirit of the land." Haru lowered his eyes. "I felt it. It is no single sorrow but countless voices bound together. I cannot face it alone." For a long moment, silence hung heavy. Then the fisherman, whose wife Haru had comforted, spoke. "Then you will not face it alone. We will walk with lanterns. If the shadows feed on forgetting, then we will remember together." Murmurs of agreement rose among the others. Farmers, weavers, hunters all pledged to stand beside Haru. For the first time, Haru felt the strength of the village not as a weight to carry, but as a circle of light surrounding him. That night, he walked the stone bridge again. The sparrow fluttered down, its tiny form casting a shadow that seemed larger than itself. Haru whispered, "Not mine alone but ours." The sparrow tilted its head, as if in quiet approval. Chapter 11 The Gathering at the Pines. The appointed night arrived. Frost lay thick on the ground, glistening beneath the moon. Villagers gathered at the edge of the pine grove, each carrying a lantern. The line of lights stretched like a river of stars along the darkened path. Haru stood at the front, Kaoru at his side. His heart pounded, but when he looked back, he saw determination on every face, farmers gripping their lanterns with calloused hands, children clutching smaller lamps with wide, brave eyes. The sparrow circled above, its wings casting fleeting shadows across the lantern glow. As they stepped into the grove, the air thickened. The shadows between the pines writhed like smoke. Whispers rose, chilling and low. "Leave us, forget us, turn away." Some villagers faltered, but Haru raised his lantern high. "We will not turn away. You are not forgotten." The villagers echoed him, voices steady, "Not forgotten." The shadows surged forward, swirling into shapes, faces twisted in anguish, arms reaching out, forms collapsing and rising again like waves. The lanterns flickered wildly, but the villagers held them firm, forming a wall of trembling light. Haru stepped forward, the sparrow landing on his shoulder. "We cannot erase your sorrow. But we can carry it. We can walk with it, and give it place among us." The vast shadow hesitated, its shifting form rippling. For the first time, Haru felt not only its grief but its exhaustion, centuries of silence pressing upon it. He knelt, lowering his lantern to the frosted earth. "Rest. Be still. Let the living remember you." The sparrow's shadow spread outward, mingling with the villagers' lantern light. Slowly, the towering darkness began to dissolve, breaking into smaller fragments that drifted upward like smoke, then faded into the moonlit sky. When it was over, the grove was silent save for the rustle of frost-touched needles. The villagers stood in awe, their lanterns steady. Kaoru laid a hand on Haru's arm. You have given them voice, and a strength. Tonight, we walked not as separate lives, but as one. Haru looked at the fading shadows among the trees and felt a quiet certainty. The path ahead was long, but he would not walk it alone. Chapter 12: The Shadow That Remains. Though the pine grove grew quiet after that night, Haru sensed that not all was at rest. The villagers went about their days with lighter hearts. Children played freely again, and songs returned to the weaving huts, but the sparrow often sat with its feathers ruffled, watching the mountains with unblinking eyes. One evening, as the first snow fell, Haru stood at the temple veranda. Lanterns flickered warmly against the white air, yet his own shadow seemed oddly deep, stretching longer than the others. The sparrow fluttered to the railing, its gaze fixed upon that shadow as though it were something separate from him. When Haru stepped closer, the shadow wavered, rippling like water. A low murmur rose from it, familiar yet foreign. Do you think the darkness ended? We also live within you. Haru's breath caught. He remembered the nights of doubt, the fear that he was too weak, too small to bear the villagers' hopes. Could those fears have given the shadows form within him? That night, he dreamed of standing in the pine grove alone. The villagers' lanterns were gone, and only his shadow stretched outward, growing taller, wider, until it towered above him. The sparrow's cry echoed faintly, but he could not see it through the dark. He woke drenched in cold sweat, the winter dawn barely piercing the shoji screens. Elder Kaoru, sensing his unrest, spoke gently the next day. Haru, shadows do not only dwell in forests and rivers. They also dwell in the hearts of men. You have faced what lies outside. Now you must face what lies within. Chapter 13: The Mirror of Still Water. Kaoru led Haru to a hidden spring deep in the forest, where a pool lay still even in winter. The surface reflected the world so clearly that branches and clouds seemed to float within its depths. This is the mirror of still water, Kaoru said. For generations, seekers have come here to face what they most fear. The water reflects not your form, but your spirit. Haru knelt at the edge, peering into the pool. At first, he saw only his own face, pale and uncertain. Then ripples spread across the water, and another figure emerged, himself, but darker, eyes hollow, mouth twisted with doubt. The shadow Haru spoke, its voice like wind through broken reeds. You carry their hopes, but you falter. You comfort them, yet you long for comfort yourself. How long before you break beneath their weight? Haru clenched his fists. I do not walk alone. The shadow laughed bitterly. Yet when fear grips you, who can stand in your place? Even the sparrow cannot bear the shadow within your heart. The sparrow, perched nearby, cried sharply, and its reflection in the pool spread across the dark figure like rippling light. Haru closed his eyes, letting the sound steady him. I am afraid, he admitted. But fear does not mean I must turn away. If shadows live in me, then I will not deny them. I will walk with them, as I walk with those of the village." The reflection wavered. Slowly, the shadow Haru dissolved into ripples, leaving only the still surface of the pool, where Haru's face returned tired, but clear-eyed. Kaoru nodded quietly. To guide others, one must also guide oneself. Light does not destroy shadow, it walks beside it. Remember this. As they left the spring, snow began to fall gently through the pines. For the first time, Haru felt not the heaviness of his shadow, but its quiet companionship. Chapter 14: The Longest Night. The winter solstice arrived. It was the longest night of the year, when even the bravest lanterns seemed small against the vast sky. Villagers gathered once more at the temple, their breath rising in pale clouds, lanterns trembling in their hands. That evening, the pine grove stirred again. Though the great shadow had dissolved weeks before, a new unrest spread through the village, illness among the elderly, animals refusing to eat, children waking in fear. Kaoru spoke gravely. The shadows have not vanished. They have returned to test whether we truly understand. Haru felt the truth in his bones. He remembered the mirror of still water, his own shadow staring back at him. This final trial would not be of the forest alone, but of every heart in the village. The sparrow circled above, its cry sharper than ever. Haru stepped onto the stone bridge where the river glimmered faintly beneath the snow. Shadows pooled there, darker than night itself, spreading outward as if to swallow the lantern light. The villagers faltered. Some clutched their children close. Haru raised his lantern but did not walk forward alone. Instead, he turned to the people and bowed. "These are not enemies," he said. "They are the echoes of all we fear to face, our losses, our doubts, our silence. Alone, I cannot carry them. But together, we can." One by one, the villagers stepped beside him. Lanterns lifted. Light gathered until the bridge glowed like a river of stars. The shadows writhed, towering into human shapes, voices overlapping sorrow, anger, longing. Haru knelt on the bridge, placing his lantern on the stone. The sparrow's shadow spread across the gathered light, weaving lantern flames into a single shimmering veil. He whispered, "Rest not in silence, but in memory. We walk with you." The villagers echoed, "We walk with you." The vast shadows trembled. Slowly, their cries softened into whispers, then into silence. One by one, they dissolved into the river's reflection until only the lanterns remained, swaying gently in the night breeze. Chapter 15: Dawn over the snow. When dawn broke, pale light spilled over the frosted roofs. The longest night had passed, and the village was quiet, peaceful in a way it had not known for generations. On the bridge, the villagers still stood together, lanterns now dimmed, their faces illuminated by the rising sun. Children laughed softly, chasing each other across the snow, while elders wiped tears from their eyes. Elder Kaoru spoke, his voice warm despite the chill. "Shadows are not to be feared. They are part of us, what we carry, what we remember." And in remembering, we find strength. Haru felt the sparrow alight on his shoulder, its tiny weight steady. For the first time, he did not see its shadow as separate from his own but as intertwined two lives walking the same path. That day, the villagers began a new tradition. Each solstice, they would place lanterns not only on the river but along the temple walls and in the pine grove itself, so that shadows might find rest in light, and the living might never forget. As the sun rose higher, Haru stood at the edge of the bridge, watching the snow sparkle. He no longer felt burdened by the role he had been given. Instead, he felt part of something vast and quiet, an endless dance of light and shadow. The sparrow chirped softly, its wings catching the dawn. Haru whispered, almost to himself, "This path is not mine alone. It is ours, always." And with that, he stepped forward into the new day, the snow crunching gently beneath his feet, his shadow long but no longer heavy. Footsteps along the misty shore. Prologue: the sound of waves in silence. The sea was never truly still. Even in the early dawn, when mist rolled across the shore like a pale shroud. The water whispered and breathed, as though the world itself exhaled softly with each retreating wave. Ren walked barefoot on the sand, the cold dampness clinging to his skin. Each step left a clear footprint, yet he knew it would not remain. The tide, patient and unyielding, would come and erase it, just as it had erased countless others before. The boy paused, gazing toward the horizon where the mist thickened into an endless wall. Somewhere beyond that veil lay memories he could not reach. His father had once walked into the fog, a fisherman chasing the promise of a great catch. He never returned. Ren bent down and touched the wet sand, feeling its chill seep into his palm. He whispered, though no one could hear him, "Are you still walking out there?" The mist gave no reply. Only the sound of waves answered, steady, eternal, and strangely comforting. Chapter 1: Mist on the shoreline. Morning in the village began not with sunlight but with sound, the hollow strike of wooden poles against boat hulls. The murmur of voices muffled by fog, the distant caw of gulls unseen above the gray. Ren's grandmother, Aya, waited for him near the weathered torii that marked the path to the beach. Her back was bent with age, yet her gaze was sharp, always searching the shoreline. "You walk the shore too often, Ren," she said gently. "The mist carries voices that belong to the past. You should not lose yourself there." Ren lowered his eyes. I want to remember." Aya nodded slowly. She did not scold him. Instead, she walked beside him, her sandals leaving shallow marks on the sand. Together they moved along the shoreline, the fog swallowing their outlines almost at once. "Do you see?" Aya pointed at their footprints trailing behind them. "They will vanish soon. But that does not mean they were never there. What matters is the step itself." Ren listened. Waves rolled in, licking at the edges of their prints, softening them before pulling them away. For a moment, he felt the strange comfort of being part of something both fragile and eternal. Chapter 2 Echoes in the Fog. The mist was thickest at dawn, when the boundary between sea and sky nearly dissolved. From the shoreline, Ren could hardly tell where the tide ended and the heavens began. It was as though the village itself floated in a world of gray. Children played along the shallows, their laughter muffled by the fog. Fishermen pushed small boats into the waves, their silhouettes quickly swallowed by the haze. Each figure seemed like a shadow more than a person, momentary, uncertain, fading as soon as one looked away. Ren wandered further down the beach, away from the others. His eyes caught faint markings in the sand, footprints, larger than his own, leading toward the water. They were fresh, unblurred by waves, yet no figure was in sight. He followed them, curiosity stirring in his chest. The footprints led him into the mist until the village sounds dimmed, replaced only by the rhythmic crash of surf. "Who are you?" he whispered, though he did not expect an answer. The footprints ended abruptly at the edge of a tide pool. He crouched and touched the damp imprint of a heel. The sand was cool, the mark sharp, as though the person had stood there just moments ago. A faint voice drifted through the fog, low, uncertain, almost like the sigh of the sea. Ren froze. His heart thudded in his chest. The sound was neither the call of gulls nor the voices of villagers. It seemed older, carrying weight like stone, yet fragile as wind. "Grandmother was right," Ren murmured. "The mist remembers." He turned back, unsettled but also strangely comforted. The footprints were already fading as the tide reached forward, pulling them into the sea's eternal silence. Chapter 3 The Lantern by the Shore. Autumn's arrival was marked not by leaves, for the village had few trees, but by the annual Lantern Festival. As the season cooled, villagers gathered to honor those who had passed, sending light onto the water to guide wandering spirits home. Ren stood with his grandmother on the beach, holding a small lantern made of thin paper stretched over a bamboo frame. Inside, a single candle flickered, its glow trembling like a heartbeat. "Your father carried such a lantern once," Aya said softly. Her wrinkled hands adjusted the base, ensuring the candle would not fall. "When you send it out, do not cling. Let it drift where it will." The beach was alive with quiet ceremony. Families knelt by the water, lowering lanterns onto the tide. 100 soft flames floated across the waves, their light blurring within the mist until they seemed like distant stars scattered upon the sea. Ren stepped forward, hesitant. He placed his lantern gently upon the water. The tide accepted it, pulling it outward with steady grace. For a moment, he thought he saw a figure standing beyond the first line of waves, a tall man, familiar in stance, watching silently. The mist wavered, and the figure was gone. Ren's chest tightened. He whispered, barely audible above the surf, "Father, was that you?" No answer came, only the sighing of the sea and the steady drift of lanterns into darkness. But Ren felt something shift within him. The shore no longer seemed only a place of absence. In the trembling glow across the waves, he felt a presence fragile yet enduring, like a voice carried in fog. That night, long after the lanterns had vanished into the horizon, Ren dreamed of walking along the shore beside his father. Their footsteps remained in the sand far longer than the tide should have allowed, as though the sea itself wished to remember. Chapter 4: The Fisherman's Song. The morning after the Lantern Festival, the village returned to its rhythm. Nets were mended, boats prepared, and baskets of seaweed set out to dry. Yet there was a hush in the air, as though the mist itself carried echoes of the lights that had floated away. Ren walked toward the docks, where the old fisherman Daichi sat repairing a net. His weathered face was tanned by years of sun and salt, and his voice, when he hummed, carried a depth like the sea itself. "You were at the shore last night, boy," Daichi said without looking up. "Your lantern drifted far." Ren blinked. "How could you tell? The fog was so thick." Daichi chuckled, the sound like gravel rolling in the surf. "The fog hides shapes, not spirit. The sea carries what it chooses. Your lantern had weight. It moved like it knew where it was meant to go." He began to sing a slow, lilting melody in a dialect so old that Ren understood only fragments. The tune was about sailors lost at sea, but it was not a song of grief. It was one of return, of voices carried home by waves. Ren sat listening, mesmerized. The song seemed to weave into the mist, until it was hard to tell whether the fisherman sang or the sea itself. Daichi finally paused and said, "Remember this, boy, the sea does not forget. It only teaches us how to listen." Ren carried those words with him, like a secret tide moving within his chest. Chapter 5: The Hidden Shrine. One evening, while exploring the rocky cliffs beyond the village, Ren stumbled upon a narrow path half hidden by reeds. Curiosity urged him forward. The path wound between stones and ended at a small clearing where a forgotten shrine stood. It was simple, a weathered wooden structure with a moss-covered roof, its offering box half buried in sand. A single stone lantern leaned to one side, cracked but still upright. Ren approached, brushing away fallen leaves. He noticed faint carvings on the wood waves, birds, and footprints etched in patterns. They seemed almost alive in the dim light. He knelt before the shrine. For reasons he could not explain, he whispered, "If anyone listens, I just want to understand." The mist thickened suddenly, curling between the pines above the cliff. For an instant, Ren thought he heard the flutter of winged sparrows, perhaps, or something older. A cool wind brushed against his cheek, and the footprints carved on the shrine seemed to shimmer faintly, as though reflecting moonlight. Ren's heart quickened. He did not know if he was imagining it, but he felt a presence, quiet, watchful, neither threatening nor kind, only patient. He bowed, awkward but sincere. "Thank you," he murmured, though he wasn't sure to whom. When he returned to the village, his grandmother noticed the shift in his eyes. "You've found the shrine, haven't you?" she asked. Ren hesitated. "You knew about it?" Aya nodded. "Few remember it now. But once, our people prayed there for safe return. It is said the shrine listens to footsteps more than words. Those who walk with sincerity are never truly lost." Ren thought of the footprints he had followed in the fog, and of the ones his father had left behind. The shrine's carvings lingered in his mind like a promise. Chapter 6: The Storyteller's Fire. The nights grew colder as autumn deepened. Villagers gathered in the central square, where a small fire was lit to warm hands and chase away the mist that crept even into their homes. Children clustered close, eager for stories, while elders sat quietly, nodding at familiar tales. Ren slipped into the circle. His grandmother had always told him fragments of old legends, but tonight, it was Elder Masaki who began to speak. His voice was cracked like old wood, yet strong enough to carry through the smoke-filled air. "Long ago," Masaki said, "before this village had a name, there was a fisherman who loved the sea too deeply. He walked into the mist each morning, never waiting for the sun, and always returned with more fish than anyone else. But one day, he followed footprints along the shore, footprints that were not his own. They led him far into the fog, and he did not return." The children gasped softly. Ren felt a chill. Masaki continued, "His family mourned, but they also listened. On nights when the mist was heavy, they heard him singing from beyond the waves." The footprints he had followed were not a trap, but a path, one that connected the living to the lost. "Since then, we say the mist is a bridge, not an end." Ren stared into the fire. The story struck too close. His father's disappearance, the footprints he had seen. Could the legend be more than just a tale? After the gathering ended, Masaki placed a hand on Ren's shoulder. "You have his eyes," the old man said quietly. "If you listen, perhaps you will hear what he once heard." Ren's throat tightened. He bowed deeply, unable to speak. Chapter 7: The Tides of Memory. The next morning, Ren returned to the shore. The tide was low, revealing dark rocks slick with seaweed and small pools where crabs scuttled. The mist, as always, lingered soft, patient, infinite. He walked slowly, leaving his footprints beside the receding waves. Each one seemed to echo Elder Masaki's words, as though the sand itself carried memory. Ren closed his eyes and tried to listen. Not to the crash of waves or the call of gulls, but deeper to the silence between sounds. At first, there was nothing. Then, faintly, a note. Low, distant, like the hum of a shell against the ear. It grew clearer until Ren realized it was not one voice but many, layered like currents beneath the sea. "Father?" he whispered. The voices did not answer with words, yet Ren felt warmth, as though someone walked beside him. He opened his eyes quickly, but no one was there, only the mist curling like pale smoke. Still, his heart beat differently. The footprints he left behind no longer felt empty. They were part of something larger, woven into a tapestry he could not yet see. When he returned home, his grandmother looked at him and smiled knowingly. "The shore spoke to you, didn't it?" Ren hesitated, then nodded. Aya placed her wrinkled hand over his. "Do not fear the voices. They are not calling you away. They are reminding you that you belong." Ren held those words close. For the first time since his father's disappearance, the mist did not seem like an enemy. It was a companion, carrying echoes he was only beginning to understand. Chapter 8: The Call of the Sea. Winter winds arrived early, rattling shutters and bending the bamboo groves near the village. The sea grew restless, its waves higher and its voice louder, as though the ocean itself longed to be heard. Ren stood on the shore, his cloak pulled tightly around his shoulders. The mist no longer frightened him, but it unsettled him all the same. Its shifting curtains revealed glimpses of shapes that vanished when he blinked. That morning, as he walked along the beach, he noticed a small boat drifting loose from its moorings. Without thinking, he rushed forward, grasping the rope before the tide could claim it. "Reckless, aren't you?" Daichi, the fisherman, called from behind, laughter in his voice. "The sea nearly stole you, too." Ren flushed, embarrassed. "I couldn't let it drift away." Daichi nodded, his eyes thoughtful. "A good instinct. But remember, sometimes what drifts is meant to drift. To hold on too tightly is to fight the sea itself." Ren looked out at the waves. He thought of his father, of footprints that ended where water began. Perhaps Daichi was right. Yet something inside him whispered that not everything lost was gone forever. That night, Ren dreamed again of walking beside his father. This time, the footprints they left glowed faintly, as though lit from within. The sound of waves became a song, and when Ren woke, the melody lingered on his lips. Chapter 9: The Message in the Net. One gray afternoon, while helping Daichi untangle a fishing net, Ren discovered something strange. Among the seaweed and broken shells caught in the weave lay a small wooden charm. It was weathered, its paint nearly gone, but Ren could just make out a carving, two footprints side by side. His breath caught. Where did this come from? Daichi shrugged. The sea gives what it wishes. Perhaps it's yours now. Ren turned the charm in his hands. The wood was smooth from years in the water, yet the carving remained distinct, deliberate. He felt as though it were meant for him, though he could not say why. He showed it to his grandmother that evening. Her eyes widened, and she touched the charm with reverence. "This is old," Aya whispered. "Older than me, older than this village, perhaps. It is said such charms were offerings at the cliffside shrine. They carry the prayers of those who walked before us." Ren held it tightly. The footprints carved into the wood seemed to pulse with quiet life. He felt again the presence he had sensed by the shrine, a patient awareness watching over him. That night, he placed the charm by his pillow. As he drifted into sleep, he dreamed not of his father this time. but of countless figures walking along the misty shore, men, women, children, generations upon generations. Their footprints filled the sand, overlapping and weaving together, endless as the tide. Ren woke with tears on his cheeks, though he did not know why. The charm lay warm in his hand, as though it had carried part of the dream back with him. Chapter 10: The Storm's Arrival. The sea warned them before it came. For days, the horizon grew darker, and gulls wheeled inland rather than over the waves. Nets returned empty, and the mist thickened until even the torii by the beach was swallowed whole. On the third night, the storm broke. The wind howled through the village, rattling rooftops and bending the bamboo until they groaned like old timbers. Waves slammed against the shore, higher than any Ren had ever seen, their spray reaching the houses closest to the beach. Ren and Aya stayed inside, the shutters barred. Still, through the cracks, Ren glimpsed flashes of white spray and felt the house tremble with each strike of the sea. He could not sleep. He thought of boats caught in the storm, of lanterns drowned before their light could guide anyone home. At last, he slipped outside, ignoring Aya's warning call. The storm lashed him instantly, rain like needles, wind pushing him sideways. But he pushed forward, down the muddy slope toward the beach. The shrine on the cliff loomed above, its lantern flickering faintly despite the storm. Ren stumbled toward it, clutching the wooden charm in his hand. When he reached the offering box, he knelt and pressed the charm against the wet wood. "Please," he whispered, his voice nearly lost to the gale. "Protect them. Protect us all." For a moment, he thought he heard wings again, beating faintly against the storm's roar. And though the rain still poured, something within him calmed. He knew the sea was vast, unstoppable, but he also knew he was not alone. Chapter 11: After the Storm. By morning, the storm had passed. The village lay bruised but not broken, boats damaged, roofs scattered with broken tiles, but no lives lost. Ren walked the shore, exhausted but relieved. The mist had returned, gentle now, curling around the rocks like a comforting shawl. Driftwood lay scattered across the sand, and among it, half buried, Ren found another charm. This one bore the carving of a sparrow with outstretched wings. He held it close. It felt like an answer to his prayer. Back in the village, Aya smiled faintly when she saw it. "The shrine has heard you," she said. "Footsteps, wings, waves, they are all part of the same song. You walked into the storm with faith, and you returned with its reply." Ren placed both charms side by side, footprints and wings. They seemed to belong together, as though completing a story. He did not yet understand it, but he felt its truth settling deep inside. That evening, Daichi the fisherman visited. He clapped Ren's shoulder with a rough hand. "You have the sea's favor, boy. Do not waste it. Learn to listen well, for storms will come again." Ren nodded. His gaze wandered to the horizon, where mist rose once more. He no longer saw it as a wall, but as a path leading somewhere beyond sight, carrying voices both lost and found. And in his heart, he felt his father's footsteps beside his own, steady and enduring, even in silence. Chapter 12 Lanterns on the Water. When the festival night arrived, the mist thinned just enough to reveal the sea's gentle surface. Lanterns, crafted with care by every family, lined the shore. Their paper sides bore painted wishes, cranes, waves, pine branches, the moon. Ren and Aya worked side by side, their lantern a simple square frame covered in pale paper. On it, Aya painted a sparrow mid-flight, while Ren carefully traced a set of footsteps beneath it. Together, they wrote a single word, Kibo, hope. As twilight deepened, the villagers carried their lanterns to the shore. The priestess offered prayers at the shrine, her voice rising and falling with the rhythm of the waves. Then, one by one, lanterns were set afloat. Ren knelt at the edge of the water. The waves lapped coldly around his knees as he lowered their lantern. For a moment, it nearly tipped in the current, but then it righted itself, glowing steady and bright. Aya placed her hand on his shoulder. The sea, once fierce, now held the lights as gently as a mother cradles her child. Dozens, then hundreds of lanterns drifted outward, bobbing on the tide, their reflections multiplying across the darkening water. Ren watched until his eyes blurred. In the shifting glow, he thought he saw a familiar figure, a man standing at the far edge of the lantern-lit sea, waiting. His father's outline, his steady gaze. Ren blinked, and the image dissolved into mist. Yet warmth filled his chest, steady as the lantern flame. Chapter 13 The Path Forward. The festival ended, but Ren's journey did not. Each day, he rose with the dawn, walking the misty shore, listening to the waves. Sometimes he carried the charms with him, the sparrow and the footprints, rubbing them between his fingers until the wood grew smooth with touch. The villagers began to notice. Some came to walk beside him, seeking his quiet strength. Others asked him to carve small charms for their families, believing his hands carried the blessing of the shrine. Though shy, Ren agreed. He carved not for fame, but because each gift seemed to carry a story forward. Aya, too, continued to guide him, though her presence grew lighter, like morning mist thinning under the sun. One evening, as they sat on the cliff near the shrine, she spoke softly. "You no longer need me to remind you of your father's footsteps. You carry them yourself now." Ren turned sharply, fear quickening in his chest. "Are you leaving?" She smiled. "Not leaving, only returning to where I belong. But whenever the mist rises, and the sparrow calls, you will know I am near." The words lingered as the first stars appeared. Ren did not weep. Instead, he placed the two charms together and whispered, "Then walk with me, always." From that night on, Ren became known not as the boy who had lost his father, but as the youth who listened to waves, to silence, to the voices hidden in mist. His path was only beginning, yet each step felt guided, steady as the footprints carved into the sand. And above him, whenever dusk fell, sparrows gathered in the pine trees, their shadows fluttering against the fading light, watching, waiting, reminding him that he was never truly alone. Chapter 14. Beneath the Pines. The first snow of winter dusted the pine grove in silence. Wren walked slowly along the narrow path, his footprints pressing into the white. Each step felt both heavy and light, heavy with memory, light with promise. He carried the two charms with him, tied together with a red string. The sparrow and the footprints knocked gently against his chest as he walked, a rhythm like a heartbeat. At the shrine, incense drifted upward into the pale sky. Wren knelt, bowing his head. He no longer asked why his father had been taken, nor pleaded for his return. Instead, he whispered, "Thank you for walking with me. Thank you for showing me the path." The wind stirred through the pines. It seemed to echo with faint laughter his father's voice, perhaps, or Aya's gentle tone. Wren did not try to grasp it. He let it pass, knowing it was part of the forest's song. When he rose, he found villagers gathering behind him. They carried offerings of rice, pine branches, and lanterns. One by one, they bowed, acknowledging Wren not as a child who sought guidance, but as one who offered it. Wren's heart ached with humility. He was no priest, no sage, only a boy who had walked the shore with his sorrow and found strength in silence. Yet perhaps that was enough. Epilogue: The Sparrow's Shadow. Years later, travelers would come to the misty village by the sea. They would hear of a youth who carved charms shaped like sparrows and footsteps, and who listened so deeply that the sea itself seemed to answer him. They would walk the stone path to the shrine and see, beneath the old pine tree, a small wooden carving, a sparrow in flight above a set of footprints. Beneath it, a single word was etched: Kibo. On quiet evenings, when the mist rolled in and the sparrows gathered in the branches, villagers swore they could see a faint shadow walking along the shore beside Wren. Some said it was his father. Others said it was Aya. And some believed it was both, joined in guiding him forever. But Wren himself never spoke of it. He only continued to walk, his footsteps steady, his eyes lifted toward the horizon, carrying the silence of the pines, the whispers of the waves, and the shadow of the sparrow into every dawn. The village endured. The shrine endured. And so did the quiet truth that in loss there is remembrance, in remembrance there is strength, and in strength, there is always hope. Moonlight over the stone lanterns. Prologue: The lanterns glow. The garden lay in silence, its stones cool beneath the breath of early autumn. Moss crept along the worn bases of the lanterns, each one shaped by generations of hands, square, hexagonal, rounded like the moon itself. On nights when the air was clear, the lanterns seemed to hold within them a memory of fire, though no flame burned. Tonight, however, the lanterns were bathed in moonlight. The silver glow poured over their ridges, casting long shadows across the raked gravel. Crickets sang softly in the grass, while the faint murmur of a stream carried through the stillness. It was said that these stone lanterns remembered, that each held a fragment of the prayers once offered beneath its glow. And on certain nights, when the moon rose high and full, the garden itself would whisper. Ren, a boy of 15, had grown up hearing such stories. His grandmother had told them by the hearth, her voice, like rustling leaves of monks who prayed until their shadows became part of the lanterns, of travelers who left behind wishes that bloomed centuries later. Ren never knew whether to believe. But as he stood in the garden that night, the moon high above, he felt something stir, a quiet beyond silence, a presence older than words. And he wondered, not for the first time, whether the lanterns were watching him. Chapter 1: The Boy and the Garden. Ren's family lived near the temple grounds, where the stone lanterns lined the paths like guardians of memory. His father worked as a woodcarver, shaping beams for the temple roofs, while his mother tended the small garden of their home. Ren often wandered alone among the temple stones after his chores. The monks allowed him to linger, for he disturbed nothing, only listening and watching. He would kneel by the old pond where koi moved beneath the lilies, or trace the grooves in the lanterns. With his fingers, wondering how many winters had passed since they were first set in place. One evening, as the air thickened with the scent of pine, Ren noticed a figure in the garden. A girl, about his age, sat on the stone steps leading toward the main hall. Her robe was simple, tied at the waist with a faded sash, but she carried herself with a quiet grace. Ren hesitated, uncertain whether to approach. Strangers were rare in the village, rarer still within the temple grounds. Yet the girl seemed utterly at ease, gazing at the lanterns as though she had known them forever. "You're staring," she said suddenly, without turning. Her voice was light, almost amused. Ren flushed, stepping back. "I didn't mean to." "It's all right," she interrupted, finally facing him. Her eyes were dark, reflecting the glow of the lanterns. "You hear it too, don't you? The way they hum when the moon is bright." Ren blinked. "Hum?" She tilted her head. "Listen." And though Ren strained, he heard nothing beyond the crickets and the stream. But in the stillness between sounds, in the breath that held the night together, he thought he caught the faintest resonance, like a string plucked far away, vibrating in his chest. The girl smiled. "See? The lanterns remember. They only speak to those who are willing to listen." Ren stood speechless, unsure whether he had imagined it. But deep within, something told him the girl was not wrong. Chapter 2: The Girl Named Aki. The following day, Ren returned to the temple garden, unsure whether the mysterious girl would appear again. The lanterns stood in silence, their shadows stretching thin in the late afternoon. He almost convinced himself he had imagined her. But as the bell struck evening, she emerged from behind the main hall, carrying a small bundle of herbs. "You came back," she said simply. Ren nodded, though he had no words ready. The girl placed her bundle on the stone step and began sorting leaves with careful fingers. "My name is Aki," she said, as though announcing it to the lanterns rather than to him. Ren gave his name in return. She looked at him directly. "Ren. That suits you. Strong, but fleeting. Like a ripple on water." He frowned, uncertain whether to take it as praise or teasing. But her tone held no mockery, only observation. As they spoke, Ren learned that Aki lived in a nearby village but spent much of her time tending herbs for the temple. Her grandmother had taught her how to gather plants for remedies, and she often brought them to the monks. Yet there was something else in her manner and intimacy with the lanterns, as though she belonged to their silence. "Why do you listen to them?" Ren asked finally. "Because they listen to me," Aki replied, placing her hand on one of the weathered stones. "When no one else does." Chapter 3. Shadows across the lanterns. Autumn deepened. Maple leaves scattered across the gravel paths, their red and gold mingling with the pale stones. Ren found himself returning to the garden daily, drawn by a quiet he could not name. Sometimes Aki was there, sometimes not. On the days she appeared, they spoke in fragments, never more than a few sentences. Yet those brief exchanges stayed with Ren longer than whole conversations with others. One evening, clouds veiled the moon, and the garden grew strangely dim. The lanterns, though unchanged, seemed heavier, their shadows thicker. "Do you feel it?" Aki whispered. Ren nodded, though he did not understand. "The lanterns remember sorrow, too," she said. "Not just prayers of joy. Sometimes the weight of loss settles here, waiting for someone to notice." A cold wind stirred, scattering leaves across their feet. Ren shivered, though he was not afraid. "Can they take sorrow away?" he asked. Aki shook her head. "Not take. Only share. If you listen closely, the lanterns will carry what you cannot bear alone." Ren touched the nearest lantern, tracing its rough surface. In its silence, he thought he felt an echo, his own loneliness mirrored back to him, softened by centuries of other hands, other hearts. That night, he dreamed of walking through the garden beneath countless moons, each lantern glowing with the unspoken memories of those who had come before. Chapter 4. The Festival of Lanterns. The village prepared for its autumn festival, when paper lanterns would be lit and carried to the river. Ren's father carved wooden frames for the lanterns, while his mother painted their sides with pine branches and cranes. Ren, however, found himself restless. The paper lanterns seemed fragile compared to the stone guardians at the temple. He wondered what wishes he should place upon his lantern, what prayers could endure beyond flame and water. On the night of the festival, the streets glowed with light. Children laughed, their faces illuminated by the orange flicker of fire. Music drifted from the shrine, accompanied by the slow beat of drums. Ren found Aki among the crowd, her lantern painted with a single moon. "Why only that?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Because the moon already holds every prayer." I only need to remind it." Together, they walked to the riverbank. One by one, villagers set their lanterns afloat, each carrying a wish into the current. The river shimmered with light, as if stars had fallen into its waters. Ren hesitated, holding his lantern. He thought of the stone lanterns, of Aki's words, of the quiet that listened when he had none. Finally, he set his lantern on the water and whispered, "Let my steps not be alone." The lantern drifted gently downstream, joining the countless others. Yet in its reflection on the water, Ren thought he saw not one flame, but two. Chapter 5: Whispers of the Garden. After the festival, the village returned to its quiet rhythm. The lanterns by the river had long since drifted away, but in the temple garden, the stone lanterns stood unchanged. Ren visited often. Some days, he found Aki kneeling beside the mossy bases, murmuring as though to old friends. Other days, he walked alone, listening to the hush that seemed to rise from the gravel itself. One evening, while the sky burned with the colors of late autumn, Aki beckoned him closer. "Close your eyes," she said. Ren obeyed. At first, he heard only the usual sounds: wind in the pines, the murmur of water. But gradually, beneath these, came something subtler. A low resonance, almost like a breath. "Do you hear it?" Aki whispered. Ren nodded slowly. It was not a voice, not words, but a presence steady, enduring, as though the garden itself were exhaling. "The lanterns do not speak," Aki said. "They listen. And when we finally hear that listening, we realize we are not alone." Ren opened his eyes to find the lanterns glowing faintly in the dusk, their stones softened by moonlight. For the first time, he felt the garden not as a place outside himself, but as something he carried within. Chapter 6: The Story of the Sparrow. As winter approached, Aki shared more of the tales her grandmother had told. One evening, when the first frost clung to the garden's gravel, she spoke of the lantern sparrow. "They say a sparrow once lived among these stones," she began, her breath white in the air. "Every night, it perched on the tallest lantern, chirping to the moon. The monks believed it carried prayers upward, from stone to sky." Ren smiled faintly. "And what happened to it?" Aki's gaze darkened. One winter, the sparrow did not return. The lanterns grew silent, and people feared their prayers would no longer be heard. But on nights of full moon, shadows of wings still pass across the garden, though no bird flies there. Ren turned toward the lanterns, their snow-dusted tops gleaming. For an instant, he thought he saw movement, a small shape flitting across the stones. When he blinked, it was gone. "Do you believe it?" he asked. Aki tilted her head. "The sparrow is only a story. But sometimes, stories are truer than what we see." Ren kept her words close, carrying them like a secret charm. Chapter 7: Winter's Silence. Snow fell heavily with each passing week. The temple garden became a landscape of white, where only the lanterns remained visible, their roofs capped with frost. Paths were hidden, stones blurred into drifts, yet the lanterns stood as beacons in the hush. Ren's visits grew fewer, for his father needed help carving beams for winter repairs. Yet whenever he could, he slipped away to the garden, the crunch of snow beneath his steps the only sound. One night, he found Aki waiting by the frozen pond. She held a small lantern of her own, its paper sides glowing softly. "It's too cold," Ren said. Aki smiled. "The lanterns don't mind. Why should we?" They walked together, the snow glowing pale beneath the moon. Ren realized the cold no longer bit so sharply when Aki was beside him. At the edge of the garden, they paused. Ren placed his hand on a lantern's icy surface, and Aki did the same. The silence was complete, yet within it, Ren felt the same deep presence as before, listening, enduring. And as the snow continued to fall, he understood the lanterns were not only witnesses to prayers. They were companions to time itself, keeping vigil through every season. Chapter 8: The Frozen River. By midwinter, the river that once carried festival lanterns was sealed beneath ice. Villagers walked across its surface cautiously, their steps echoing hollowly beneath their feet. Ren visited the river one morning, his breath clouding the air. The memory of hundreds of lanterns floating downstream still lingered in his mind. Now, with the water silenced, it felt as though the wishes had been locked beneath the frozen surface. He knelt, brushing snow away to reveal the glassy ice. Within, he imagined he could still see faint glimmers, reflections of flames long extinguished. That evening, he told Aki of what he had seen. She nodded thoughtfully. "The river keeps them safe," she said. "Even when frozen, it carries their memory beneath. Spring will free them again." Her words lingered in him. The idea that even silence and stillness might shelter prayers filled him with unexpected warmth. Chapter 9: The Lantern Maker. One day, Ren's father brought him to meet an old craftsman who carved stone lanterns for the temple. His workshop stood on the outskirts of the village, half buried in snow, its courtyard littered with fragments of stone. The old man's hands were thick with calluses, his eyes sharp despite his years. He showed Ren the chisels, the hammers, the slow art of shaping stone until it held both weight and grace. "Every lantern must breathe," the craftsman said, tapping the hollow space within a half-finished piece. "It is not only stone. It is a vessel for light, for silence, for memory." Ren touched the cool surface, imagining the lantern in the temple garden, bathed in moonlight. Something stirred in him, a desire to create, not only to watch. The old man studied him for a long moment. "You listen well. That is rarer than skill. Perhaps you will carve, someday." Ren carried the thought with him like a seed planted deep in winter soil. Chapter 10: Snow and Shadows. The season wore on. Snowstorms swept across the village, burying paths and bending trees beneath their weight. Yet the temple garden remained a sanctuary, its lanterns rising from the drifts like steadfast guardians. One night, Ren and Aki walked together after a heavy storm. The moon was hidden, and the garden lay in shadow. Their footsteps left narrow trails through the snow. Suddenly, a sound echoed soft, fluttering, like wings. Ren looked up, heart quickening. A shadow darted across the lantern tops, swift as breath. For a moment, it seemed to perch, tilting its head toward them. Then it vanished into the night. Ren turned to Aki, his voice hushed. "Did you see?" Her eyes shone. "The sparrow," she whispered. They stood in silence, listening to the fading echo. Whether bird or spirit, Ren could not say. But he knew, with certainty, that the garden's stories were alive, and that he was now part of them. Chapter 11: The Crack in the Lantern. Winter had nearly reached its deepest silence when Ren noticed a change in one of the oldest stone lanterns. A hairline crack split its roof, faint but spreading with each frost. He ran his fingers over it, a tremor of unease stirring within him. That evening, he told Aki. She listened quietly, then placed her palm against the stone. "Everything ages," she said softly. "Even the guardians. But perhaps it is not an ending. Perhaps it is a way of reminding us to care for them, as they have cared for us." Ren frowned. "Can it be repaired?" "Stone can be mended," Aki replied. "But what matters is that the prayers it holds are never broken." Her words comforted him, though the sight of the crack lingered in his thoughts. It felt symbolic, an echo of time pressing forward, of things once eternal now yielding to change. That night, as snow drifted against the lantern's base, Ren dreamed of carving one himself whole and new, yet filled with the same listening silence. Chapter 12: The Night of the Full Moon. The coldest night of the year arrived with a full moon, bright enough to turn the snow to silver. The village slept, but Ren could not. Something urged him toward the temple garden. There, the lanterns gleamed as though lit from within. Their shadows stretched long and deep, merging into one another until the garden seemed alive with movement. Aki was already there, her figure framed in moonlight. She did not seem surprised to see him. "They are awake tonight," she whispered. Ren stepped closer. The hum he had once strained to hear now filled him clearly, a resonance that seemed to rise from the stones, the snow, even from his own heartbeat. And then soft, unmistakable, the flutter of wings. The sparrow's shadow darted across the lanterns, circling, dipping, before vanishing into the moonlight. Ren felt tears on his cheeks, though he did not know why. Aki touched his arm. "Do you see now? The lanterns remember not only sorrow, but hope. They keep it until we are ready to carry it ourselves." In that moment, Ren understood the lanterns did not hold answers. They held silence, into which people poured their prayers, their grief, their wishes. And in that silence, the prayers endured. Chapter 13: The Path of Stone. As winter began to ease, Ren returned often to the old craftsman's workshop. The man guided his hands over the stone, teaching him the patient rhythm of chisel against surface. "Do not rush," the craftsman said. "The stone carries its own time. You must listen." Ren worked slowly, shaping what would become his first lantern. It was uneven, the edges rough, but when at last he set it down, he felt something stir within it, a quietness he recognized from the temple garden. He placed the unfinished lantern near his home, where the moonlight touched it faintly. That night, he dreamed not of sparrows or shadows, but of the simple rhythm of footsteps, his own letting forward across snow, across seasons, toward a path still unwritten. When he told Aki, she smiled. "Then the lanterns have done their work. They have given you a voice of your own." Ren realized then that his place was not only to listen, but to continue. To shape silence into something that could endure after him, as the lanterns had endured after countless lives. Chapter 14: The Lantern's Farewell. Spring returned, gentle and hesitant, brushing the snow from rooftops and loosening the frozen soil. The temple garden awoke with moss and early blossoms, yet the lanterns remained unchanged, still guardians of silence. Ren visited one evening as the sun bled into dusk. The cracked lantern stood where it always had, fragile yet enduring. He placed his hands upon it, bowing his head. "Thank you," he whispered. The air shifted. Perhaps it was the wind, or perhaps something deeper, but he felt the lantern's hum once more, a softer resonance, like a sigh. The sparrow's shadow flitted across the stones and then was gone. Aki joined him quietly. Together, they stood until the sky darkened fully and the stars appeared. "The lanterns will remain," she said. "But you must carry the silence forward in your own way." Ren nodded. He no longer felt bound only to listen. He was ready to answer. Epilogue: The quiet flame. Years passed. The old craftsman's hands grew frail, but Ren's grew strong. One by one, he shaped new lanterns, some small, some tall, each imperfect yet filled with stillness. Villagers placed them in gardens, by shrines, along paths where night was deep. Sometimes, walking home beneath the moon, Ren would hear a sparrow's call and remember the first time he had seen its shadow dance upon the lanterns. The memory no longer ached, it guided him. Aki remained beside him, her voice still carrying the cadence of wind through pines. Together, they tended the temple garden, where the oldest lanterns still stood. The cracked one remained as it was, never mended, because in its fracture lay a beauty, a reminder that even stone bears the weight of time. And so the lanterns continued their watch, silent yet eternal. They did not answer prayers, they did not erase sorrow. They simply listened, patiently, until those who came were ready to walk forward again. On the night of another full moon, Ren placed a final lantern at the garden's edge. He lit it with a small flame, then stepped back. The light flickered, swayed, but did not fade. The silence deepened, not empty but full, like the breath before dawn. And in that silence, Ren understood the lanterns did not hold the village. The village held the lanterns. And so long as even one person listened, the flame quiet, gentle, eternal would never die. Petals falling in the gentle rain. Prologue. The first rain. The village lay quiet beneath a soft drizzle. The kind of gentle rain that barely disturbed the blossoms but left them glistening as though sprinkled with silver. Petals fell slowly from the cherry trees, carried by the rhythm of the wind, settling on stone paths and moss-covered roofs. Wren stood at the edge of the garden, his coat damp but his spirit untroubled. He had grown up with the rain, listening to it tap against the temple eaves, feeling the earth sigh beneath the droplets. Yet today, the rain seemed different, as if it carried a message. Somewhere beyond the village, the mountains were hidden in mist. Streams swelled with the water, running past rice paddies and winding toward the river. In this soft, wet silence, Wren felt the pulse of the world, a quiet, steady heartbeat he could almost follow. It was said that cherry blossoms remembered those who had walked beneath them, and that rain carried their whispers forward. Wren had not believed until today. The first drop landed on his hand, and he realized perhaps this rain had been waiting just for him. Chapter 1. The Boy and the Blossoms. Wren's home was a small wooden house at the edge of the village, near the temple's garden. His father was a woodworker who carved beams for the temple roof, and his mother tended a patch of flowers and herbs. Wren's life was simple, measured by the seasons, the work of his hands, and the slow passage of the sun and moon. He loved the garden most of all. Even in the rain, he would walk beneath the cherry trees, watching petals fall in spirals and clusters. Each one seemed to carry a memory, a whispered story of someone who had once paused here, who had looked up at the blossoms and left a piece of their heart behind. One morning, Wren noticed a girl seated beneath the largest cherry tree. Her robe, pale and simple, was wet with rain, yet she seemed completely absorbed in the blossoms above her. She held a small notebook, its pages damp, and sketched the petals as they fell. Wren hesitated. Visitors were rare, and strangers in the garden rarer still. But something about her presence felt familiar, as if the rain itself had guided her here. "You watched too," she said without looking up. Wren blinked. I just like the blossoms." She smiled faintly, still sketching. "They tell stories. Not all stories are written down, but some of them can be seen if you watch closely." Wren took a cautious step closer. "What kind of stories?" "Stories of rain," she said. "Of petals falling, of lives touching and leaving behind a trace. Even the smallest drop can be remembered." Wren was silent, letting her words settle. The garden seemed to deepen, the rain more present, the petals more deliberate in their descent. For the first time, he wondered if perhaps the blossoms and the rain were listening, and waiting to speak. Chapter 2. The Voice of Rain. The girl introduced herself as Aika. She was a traveler, although she provided no details about her origins. She carried little besides her sketchbook and a bundle wrapped in cloth. Wren and Aika began to meet often beneath the cherry trees. Sometimes they spoke, but more often they sat in silence, letting the rhythm of the rain and the soft flutter of petals fill the spaces between them. One afternoon, when the drizzle had lightened into a fine mist, Aika pressed her hand against the trunk of the old cherry tree. "Do you hear it?" she asked. Ren frowned, listening. All he heard was the rain striking leaves and stones, the faint rush of a nearby stream. Aika tilted her head. "Not with your ears. With your heart. The rain is a voice, and the petals are words. They carry what people leave behind." Ren did not know whether to laugh or believe her. But as he watched the petals cling to her sleeve, he thought he saw something faint impressions, like shadows of memories, drifting in the mist. A child laughing, a woman whispering, a man bowing before the blossoms. He gasped, and the vision vanished. "You saw it," Aika murmured. Ren nodded slowly. His world had always been quiet, simple, but now he felt a depth hidden beneath each drop of rain. Chapter 3 Echoes in the Garden. Days stretched into weeks. The cherry trees bloomed in full, and then, under the constant rains, began to shed. The garden's stone paths became carpets of petals, their pale colors glowing even in the dimness of cloudy skies. Ren began to hear things he had never noticed before: faint whispers when the rain touched the lanterns, sighs when petals floated onto the pond. He asked Aika about it. "They are echoes," she explained. "Every life leaves a trace. Rain remembers, blossoms carry, and the garden holds." Ren found himself both unsettled and comforted. Each time he passed through the garden, he wondered what stories lingered in the droplets that landed on his hands. One evening, as the rain fell harder than usual, Aika opened her sketchbook to show him her drawings. They were not merely of blossoms, but of faces hidden within the petals, faces of villagers, travelers, even strangers he did not know. "These are not mine," Aika said softly. "They came to me. When I watch the petals, I see them." Ren stared at the pages. The faces seemed alive, their eyes shining with longing or sorrow or joy. He felt as though he were intruding upon the private world of spirits. "Why show me this?" he asked. "Because you can hear too. You just haven't learned to trust it." Ren shivered, not from the cold, but from the sense that his life was slowly shifting into something larger than himself. Chapter 4 The Festival of Rain. As spring reached its height, the village prepared for its annual festival. Lanterns were hung along the streets, drums rehearsed their rhythms, and vendors set up stalls with sweets and tea. Yet that year, the rain did not stop. Some villagers complained, saying the festival should be delayed, but the elders insisted the rain was part of the blessing. Ren walked the festival path with Aika. Petals clung to their hair and clothes as they passed glowing lanterns. Children splashed in puddles, laughing despite the drizzle. The scent of roasted chestnuts and fresh mochi drifted through the wet air. At the temple's entrance, a priest raised his voice. "Tonight, we give thanks not only for blossoms, but for the rain that carries them. Let us remember the voices it brings." Ren and Ika stood together as the villagers lit candles and placed them beneath the cherry trees. The flames flickered in the rain, tiny suns refusing to go out. Ren felt the whispers again, stronger than ever, woven through the sound of water and laughter. The voices were no longer faint, they filled him, as though the rain itself wanted him to listen. Beside him, Ika whispered, "This is why I came." Ren turned, startled. But Ika did not explain further. She only watched the falling petals, her eyes reflecting both sorrow and serenity. Chapter 5: Secrets in the Rain. After the festival, the rain did not fade. Day after day, the drizzle lingered, soft but insistent, as if the heavens wished to keep the blossoms aloft a little longer. The streets gleamed with wet stones, and streams overflowed their banks. Ren began to notice changes in Ika. She often wandered alone in the mist, her notebook clutched tightly to her chest. Her eyes seemed distant, as though listening to voices no one else could hear. One evening, beneath the largest cherry tree, Ren found her staring at the pond. Petals floated across its surface like pale boats. "You're not just a traveler, are you?" he asked quietly. Ika smiled faintly but did not answer. Instead, she touched the water, and ripples spread outward, scattering petals. "I came here because the rain remembers," she said. "And there is something I must not forget." Ren wanted to ask more, but the weight of her voice silenced him. He realized her journey was not simply one of wandering, it was tied to the rain, to the blossoms, and perhaps to the garden itself. Chapter 6: The Dream of Petals. That night, Ren dreamed. He stood in the temple garden, but the trees were brighter than moonlight, and the petals glowed as they fell. The rain whispered not in words, but in 1,000 overlapping voices, each carrying fragments of memory. He saw a family bowing before the cherry tree, their faces blurred yet filled with reverence. He saw a traveler kneeling in the rain, clutching a book. And he saw Ika, her hair damp, her eyes wide, reaching for something unseen. Ren awoke breathless, the sound of rain still echoing in his ears. When he told Ika the next day, she nodded. "You're beginning to see," she said. "The rain shares with those who are willing. But it also burdens them. Not everyone can bear the weight of so many voices." Her words frightened Ren. What if he could not carry it? What if listening meant losing himself? Yet when another petal landed on his hand, cool and fragile, he felt only peace. Chapter 7: Shadows Beneath the Blossoms. The village began to whisper. Some said Ika was a spirit who had come with the rain. Others claimed she was a shrine maiden who had lost her way. Children followed her from a distance, curious but afraid. Ren defended her quietly, though he himself did not fully understand who or what she was. One evening, a storm swept through the village. The rain poured harder than ever, bending branches and scattering blossoms in great clouds. Ren ran to the temple garden, where he found Ika kneeling by the cracked lantern, her notebook open and drenched. "What are you doing?" he shouted above the rain. "I'm listening," she cried back. "The voices are strongest in the storm. They're calling, don't you hear them?" Ren closed his eyes. Amid the roar of water, he heard faint cries, sorrow, longing, joy, regrets, an ocean of memories pouring into the garden. He reached for Aika's hand. "You don't have to carry it alone." She looked at him, her face streaked with rain and tears, and for the first time, she seemed fragile, human, breakable. Together, they knelt beneath the storm, petals lashing around them, and listened as the rain spoke its endless song. Chapter 8: The Cracked Lantern. After the storm, the temple garden lay transformed. Branches were broken, petals washed into great heaps along the paths, and the pond overflowed with muddy water. Yet the cracked lantern still stood, its stone dark with rain but unbroken. Ren and Aika returned often to this lantern. It seemed to pulse with quiet strength, a vessel for all the voices the rain carried. One evening, as twilight settled, Aika placed her hand upon the lantern's fissure. "This is where they gather," she said softly. "The rain flows into the cracks, and the voices settle here. That's why I must stay." Ren frowned. "Stay? You mean you cannot leave the village?" Aika lowered her gaze. "I was never meant to wander far. My path is tied to these voices. Long ago, someone dear to me walked beneath these blossoms, and their memory is here. If I leave, I lose them forever." Ren felt the weight of her words. He had come to cherish her presence, and the thought of her bound by sorrow pained him. "You're not alone anymore," he said. "If the rain remembers, then let us remember together." Chapter 9: The Festival of Lanterns. Summer approached, and with it came the Festival of Lanterns, when villagers floated glowing lights down the river to honor the departed. The rain had lightened, but mists still clung to the hills, and the river swelled with quiet strength. Ren and Aika joined the villagers at dusk, carrying their lanterns to the water's edge. Each flame was a fragile sun trembling against the evening wind. As Ren set his lantern afloat, he thought of the voices he had heard in the rain, the laughter, the tears, the fragments of countless lives. He whispered a prayer for them all, that they might find peace. Aika held her lantern close for a long moment before releasing it. Her eyes glistened. "Who was it?" Ren asked gently. She smiled through her tears. "My brother. He left long ago, traveling beyond the mountains. He never returned. But when I sit in the rain, when I watch the petals fall, I hear him. I think he found his way back here, to this garden." Ren's chest tightened. At last, he understood her journey, her devotion to the voices. The river carried their lanterns away, flames reflecting on the rippling surface, until they were swallowed by the mist. Chapter 10: The Silent Garden. When the festival ended, the village returned to its quiet routine. But for Ren and Aika, everything had changed. Their bond had deepened, woven together by rain and memory. One night, they returned to the garden. The rain had ceased for the first time in many weeks. The air was still, the blossoms nearly gone. Only a few petals clung stubbornly to the branches, trembling in the faint breeze. "It feels empty without the rain," Ren murmured. "Not empty," Aika said. "Only resting. Silence is also a voice, if you know how to hear it." They sat together beneath the great cherry tree. The cracked lantern stood nearby, faintly gleaming in the moonlight. Ren closed his eyes, listening. At first, he heard nothing. Then softly, faintly a whisper rose in the silence, as if the absence of rain had revealed another layer of sound. Not sorrow, not longing, but peace. He opened his eyes and looked at Aika. She was smiling, her notebook resting closed in her lap. For the first time, she looked unburdened, as though the voices had settled within her rather than weighed her down. And Ren knew then that the rain, the petals, and the silence all spoke the same truth: memory endures, but it does not bind. It flows, like water, like time. Chapter 11: The Path Beyond Blossoms. Summer deepened. The cherry trees now bore only green leaves, their petals long since carried away by the streams. Yet Ren still felt the memory of their rain-soaked days whenever he walked through the garden. Aika seemed quieter than before. She still visited daily, sketched in her notebook, but her eyes often lingered on the hills beyond the village. One evening, as the cicadas droned and the sky turned violet, Ren asked, "Are you thinking of leaving?" Aika hesitated. "I don't know. The rain brought me here, but perhaps it also means to carry me farther." The voices, they've grown softer, as if telling me I've listened enough. Ren's heart tightened. The thought of her absence left an emptiness he could not describe. "But if you leave, will you lose him, your brother?" he asked. Aika shook her head slowly. "No. I think he wanted me to find peace. Not to cling." Ren said nothing more. He only walked beside her, listening to the cicadas, feeling the weight of both presence and impermanence. Chapter 12: Rain once more. As if to answer her uncertainty, the rains returned. Not storms, not endless drizzle, but a gentle shower that came with late summer evenings, pattering softly upon the rooftops and gardens. Ren and Aika stood together under the temple's eaves, watching the drops scatter across the stone path. "It feels like the first day we met," Ren said. Aika smiled faintly. "Yes. The rain always returns to remind us of beginnings." She stepped out into it, her robe dampening quickly, her hair clinging to her cheeks. She raised her arms, spinning slowly as petals had once done. Though there were no blossoms now, the rain itself seemed to glow around her. Ren watched in silence, struck by the fragility and strength of her form, like a lantern's flame trembling yet steady against the wind. Finally, she returned to him, dripping but radiant. "I think I'm ready," she said softly. "The rain has given me what I needed. It's time to walk my own path again." Chapter 13: The Farewell Garden. On her final day in the village, the sky was clear. The cherry trees stood in their summer green, no petals, no rain. Ren and Aika walked the garden path one last time. She paused before the cracked lantern, tracing its fissure with her fingers. "This place will always hold his memory," she whispered. "And now, yours too." Ren swallowed hard. "Will you come back?" Aika looked at him, her eyes both sorrowful and serene. "Perhaps. Or perhaps the rain will carry me elsewhere. But remember, Ren, the voices are not gone. They live in silence, in rain, in petals, in you." She handed him her notebook. Its pages were filled with faces, blossoms, streams of rain captured in delicate strokes. "I won't need it anymore," she said. "You'll see the stories now, even without these pages." Ren clutched the notebook, unable to speak. Aika bowed gently, then walked down the path toward the hills. The cicadas sang, and the garden seemed to exhale. When she was gone, Ren stood alone beneath the trees. For a long time, he listened not for footsteps, not for voices, but for the quiet truth the rain had taught him. And in that silence, he felt her presence still, as if every drop of memory would always fall gently into his hands. Chapter 14: Echoes of Rain. The days after Aika's departure felt long and hollow for Ren. The garden seemed unchanged: stone paths, lanterns, moss, and the steady rhythm of summer insects, but everything bore a quiet absence. Each morning, he opened the notebook she had left behind. At first, he only stared at the sketches, letting memories flood him. Then, little by little, he began to add his own marks: a line of trees beneath the moon, the cracked lantern in new rain. Even the small sparrow that visited the veranda each dawn. He realized then that he was no longer only a caretaker of the temple. He had become a keeper of stories of rain, of petals, of the lives that drifted through the garden like passing seasons. One evening, a soft drizzle began once more. Ren sat by the veranda, notebook in hand, and listened. For the first time, he understood the voices not as whispers from the past, but as the garden itself, breathing, remembering, offering. He smiled, his brush pausing mid-stroke. Somewhere beyond the hills, he imagined Aika also standing in the rain, listening to the same truth. Epilogue: petals without end. Years later, when spring returned and the cherry trees bloomed once more, the garden was alive with falling petals. Villagers often came to sit under the branches, to admire the blossoms and the quiet serenity of the temple. Ren welcomed them, offering tea, guiding them through the mossy paths, showing them the old lantern that now seemed a symbol of endurance. He never spoke of Aika directly, but in every story. He told of petals dancing in the rain, of lanterns glowing in twilight, of sparrows resting in silence. Her presence lingered. The children especially loved his tales, their eyes wide as if hearing the garden breathe. On one such evening, as twilight deepened, Ren stood beneath the trees and watched the petals fall. The rain began, mingling with blossoms, carrying them into rivulets across the stones. He closed his eyes and bowed his head. The voices had not faded. They would never fade. For in every drop of rain, in every scattered petal, in every fleeting season, there was continuity. Presence within absence. Memory within silence. The garden did not belong to him. It did not belong to the past. It belonged to the rain, to the petals, to all who paused to listen. Ren opened the notebook once more. On its final page, he drew a single petal, drifting downward, caught between earth and sky. Beneath it, he wrote only one word: "Listen." And the garden answered, as it always had, with the gentle rain. The garden sleeps in snow. Prologue: the silent blanket. The first snow of winter fell gently over the old garden, covering moss, stone lanterns, and winding paths in a quiet shroud of white. The pond, once alive with ripples of carp, rested beneath a thin layer of ice, while the pines bowed with the weight of the new season. The temple bell did not ring that night. Instead, the silence itself became a sound, echoing through the stillness of the mountains. It was said that when the garden slept beneath snow, memories stirred within it, memories of generations who had walked its paths, sat beneath its cherry blossoms, and watched lantern light dance upon the pond. The snow preserved not only the earth but also the breath of time itself. In this silence, the garden seemed to dream. And within that dream, a story began to awaken. Chapter 1: Footprints in White. Ren, the young caretaker of the temple garden, rose before dawn. The air was sharp, each breath rising like smoke against the pale blue of early winter. He slid open the shoji, and the scene before him made him pause. The entire garden was white. The stepping stones, once dark and smooth, now carried a soft crown of snow. The maple branches reached out like ink strokes on paper, their tips frosted and delicate. No bird song greeted the morning, only the faint creak of ice forming along the pond's edge. Ren stepped carefully into the garden, his sandals sinking slightly into the snow. He left a trail of footprints behind him, the only marks upon the untouched blanket. For a moment, he felt as though he were intruding upon a sacred painting, disturbing a perfection too fragile to hold. As he brushed snow from the stone lantern, he noticed something unusual: faint footprints leading from the outer gate toward the inner path. They were not his own. They were small, light, as if left by someone hesitant, someone who did not wish to be seen. Ren followed them, his curiosity piqued. The trail curved along the moss-covered wall and stopped near the old cherry tree that stood by the pond. There, the snow was disturbed as if someone had stood quietly for a long time, gazing at the frozen water. But the figure was gone. Only silence remained, along with the soft fall of new snow beginning to cover the tracks once more. Ren stood there for a long while, listening. The garden, in its slumber, seemed to whisper something he could not yet understand. He bowed his head slightly toward the cherry tree and turned back, his footprints now the only clear trace upon the sleeping earth. Chapter 2: The Visitor in the Mist. The morning passed slowly, and Ren continued his daily duties, brushing snow from the temple steps, fetching water from the well, and tending to the hearth. Yet his thoughts kept returning to the footprints he had found in the garden. By midday, a soft mist rose from the melting snow, blurring the outlines of trees and lanterns. The world seemed caught between waking and dreaming. As Ren carried firewood past the gate, he caught sight of movement, a figure slipping between the mist-veiled pines. His heart quickened. The figure was slender, cloaked in a pale kimono patterned faintly with plum blossoms. Long hair, dark as night, shimmered faintly with drops of melting frost. The woman paused at the cherry tree, resting her hand gently upon its trunk. Ren could not see her face clearly, yet there was something familiar in her presence, as if she belonged to the garden itself. Before he could call out, she vanished into the mist, leaving only the impression of her footsteps in the snow. Chapter 3: Echoes of the Past. That evening, Ren sat by the fire, listening to the crackle of wood. The old abbot, Master Jinnen, poured tea into 2 cups and set one before him. "You saw her, didn't you?" Jinnen asked calmly, his eyes reflecting the firelight. Ren nearly spilled his tea. "You mean woman?" The abbot nodded. "This garden holds many memories. In winter, when silence deepens, they sometimes walk among us." Ren frowned. "Memories as people?" Jinnen smiled faintly. "Not people like you or me. But impressions, echoes. The woman by the cherry tree has appeared before. Some say she is the spirit of a noblewoman who once sought refuge here. Others believe she is the garden's own memory, given shape by snow and silence." Ren thought of the way she had touched the cherry tree, her gesture filled with sorrow and tenderness. "Why does she come?" he asked softly. "To remind us," Jinnen replied, sipping his tea, "that the past never truly disappears. It only sleeps, like the garden under snow." Chapter 4: Beneath the Frozen Branches. That night, unable to sleep, Ren returned to the garden. The moon cast a silver glow upon the snow, turning the scene into a living ink painting. The frozen branches of the cherry tree glistened like glass. He stood there for a long time, listening. At first, there was only silence. Then, faintly, he heard the rustle of fabric, the whisper of bare feet upon snow. The woman emerged once more from the shadows. This time, her face was clearer, delicate, serene, yet touched by sorrow. Her eyes seemed to hold centuries of silence. Ren bowed deeply, his breath clouding in the cold air. "If you are of this place," he whispered, "please tell me what you seek." The woman tilted her head slightly, as if considering his words. Then she raised her hand toward the frozen pond. Beneath its icy surface, something glimmered faintly, like a hidden lantern waiting to be lit. Before Ren could look closer, the woman faded, leaving him alone beneath the branches. The snow continued to fall, covering her footprints once again. Chapter 5: The Lantern Beneath Ice. The following morning, Ren went straight to the pond. Kneeling by the frozen edge, he brushed away the snow that had settled overnight. The ice beneath shimmered faintly, and for a moment he thought he glimpsed a shape glowing deep within the water, a lantern, faintly lit, as though caught between worlds. He pressed his palm against the ice, but it was solid, unyielding. The glow flickered once, then vanished, leaving only his reflection staring back at him. Master Jinan joined him, walking slowly along the stepping stones. "You saw it," the abbot said quietly. Ren nodded. "A lantern beneath the ice. What does it mean?" "The garden remembers not only joy but sorrow," Jinan replied. "That lantern is part of an old story, one that lingers here like a breath trapped in winter air. Perhaps she wishes you to uncover it." Ren turned toward the cherry tree. He could almost feel the woman's presence, watching from unseen shadows. Chapter 6 Whispers in the Library. That evening, Ren sought the temple library. Scrolls and faded records lined the wooden shelves, carrying centuries of names, prayers, and memories. By the light of a single oil lamp, he searched for any mention of a woman by the cherry tree. Hours passed. Finally, he found a passage in an old chronicle. In the year of great snow, a lady of the capital sought refuge within these walls. Fleeing sorrow, she walked the garden paths until dawn. It is said she left behind a lantern by the pond, a symbol of her unspoken prayer. Ren read the words again and again. A noblewoman, a lantern, the winter garden. It matched too closely to be a coincidence. Who was she? What sorrow had brought her here? And why, after so many years, did her memory still walk among the snow? As he closed the scroll, he felt a sudden chill, though no wind stirred the room. A whisper brushed against his ear, too soft to form words, but filled with yearning. He shivered, realizing he was not alone even here among the silent shelves. Chapter 7 The Garden's Dream. Snow fell heavily that night, blanketing the world in white silence. Ren dreamed he was walking the garden paths again, but this time, the snow was untouched, as if he were the first to set foot upon it. The cherry tree stood tall, its branches laden with blossoms of snow rather than petals. Beneath it, the woman awaited him, her kimono shimmering like frost in moonlight. She raised her hand and spoke, her voice soft, like a breeze through bamboo. The lantern holds what was left unsaid. Find it, and you will know my sorrow. Ren reached toward her, but his hand touched only snow. The garden dissolved around him, and he woke with his heart racing, the dream still echoing in his mind. Outside, the wind carried the sound of snow sliding from pine branches, a quiet sigh as though the garden itself had exhaled. Chapter 8 The Frozen Memory. The following morning dawned pale and silent. Ren returned to the pond with a resolve he had not felt before. Kneeling, he chipped gently at the ice, careful not to disturb the surface too harshly. Beneath the translucent layer, he once again saw the faint glow of the lantern. The sight pulled at him like a thread of memory not his own. His fingers trembled. It felt as though he were about to disturb not just the pond but the very fabric of time. A crow called from the temple roof, startling him. When he looked again, the glow had vanished, leaving the pond dark and still. Behind him, Master Jinnen's voice carried through the crisp air. Some memories cannot be forced open, Ren. They will reveal themselves when the garden is ready. Ren bowed his head, though his heart still ached with questions. If the garden itself was guarding the memory, how could he know when the time was right? Chapter 9: The Abbot's Story. That evening, Ren sat with Master Jinnen in the abbot's small chamber. The fire flickered, casting long shadows upon the wooden walls. The old man poured tea, his movements slow and deliberate. "Do you wish to know the story of the lantern?" Jinnen asked, as though reading Ren's unspoken thoughts. Ren nodded eagerly. Jinnen's gaze drifted to the snow beyond the sliding door. Long ago, during a winter of unrest, a lady from the capital fled to this temple. She was said to be of noble birth, but her life was marred by tragedy. Her betrothed was taken from her, and her family lost favor in the court. Seeking peace, she came here, to these mountains. Ren leaned closer, listening. She found solace in the garden, Jinnen continued. Each night she would walk its paths, pausing at the cherry tree. One night, she carried a lantern to the pond. It is said she placed within it a prayer, her final wish. No one knows what words she left behind. But after that night, she vanished. Some believe she passed away here in silence, others say she returned to the capital, though her spirit remained bound to this place. Ren whispered, "The lantern beneath the ice." Jinnen nodded. Yes. Perhaps it is her prayer, preserved by snow and time. Chapter 10: The Woman's Voice. That night, the dream returned. Ren found himself once more in the snowy garden, beneath the cherry tree heavy with icy blossoms. The woman stood before him, her presence more vivid than before. This time, her voice reached him clearly. "My lantern, it carries the words I could never speak. Without them, I cannot rest." Her eyes glistened with unspoken grief. Ren felt a weight press upon his chest, as if her sorrow had become his own. "Then I will find it," he said firmly, his breath forming white clouds in the dream air. "I will bring your prayer back to light." The woman's expression softened, almost a smile, but her figure dissolved into falling snow before he could say more. Ren awoke in the darkness of his chamber, his resolve set like stone. He would uncover the truth of the lantern, no matter what lay hidden beneath the ice. Chapter 11: Breaking the Silence. The next day, Ren rose before dawn. The garden was hushed under fresh snowfall, the world glimmering pale in the first light. He carried with him a small hammer and chisel, tools normally used to repair the stone paths. Kneeling by the pond, he pressed the chisel gently against the ice. The surface cracked faintly, a thin web of lines spreading outward. Each strike echoed strangely in the stillness, as if the garden itself was listening. His breath came quick, misting in the cold air. Beneath the cracking surface, the faint glow returned the lantern, patient and waiting. Yet before he could break through completely, the sound of footsteps halted him. Turning, he saw the woman again, standing near the cherry tree. Her gaze held neither anger nor approval, only quiet sorrow. Slowly, she shook her head, her sleeve drifting like falling snow. Ren lowered his tools. The glow beneath the ice dimmed once more. Chapter 12: The Abbot's Warning. That evening, Ren confessed to what he had tried to do. Master Jinan listened in silence, his eyes half closed. "You must be careful," Jinan said at last. "The garden does not yield its secrets through force. What is hidden here is not simply an object, but a memory, a wound. To break the ice without her permission is to risk disturbing the balance." Ren clenched his fists. "But if I do nothing, she will never rest. Her sorrow will linger forever." The abbot placed a hand on his shoulder. "Compassion is not the same as urgency. To help her, you must listen not to your impatience, but to the garden itself. Only when silence speaks will the lantern rise." Ren bowed, though frustration gnawed at him. He wanted to act, to bring light to what lay hidden, yet the path remained obscured, as quiet and impenetrable as falling snow. Chapter 13: The Night of Deep Snow. That night, a heavy storm blanketed the temple in silence so thick that even the bells of the valley were muted. Ren lit a small lantern and walked the garden paths, the snow rising past his ankles. The world seemed dreamlike, transformed into an endless sea of white. At the cherry tree, he paused, lantern in hand, and whispered, "If you wish me to wait, I will. But if you are ready, guide me." The snow fell heavily, wrapping him in silence. Then, faintly, he heard it, a voice carried on the wind, not words but a song, like a lullaby forgotten by time. It led him to the pond, where the ice now shimmered with light from beneath. The woman appeared again, closer this time, her presence almost tangible. She looked at him, her expression softer than before, and raised her hand toward the glowing water. Ren fell to his knees, understanding at last. It was not his strength that could release the lantern, it was her will. Chapter 14: The Lantern's Light. The storm passed by dawn. The garden lay under a new, untouched blanket of snow, glistening in the pale light of morning. Ren hurried to the pond, his heart pounding. The ice was no longer solid. A thin opening had formed, as though the storm itself had cracked the surface. Beneath it, glowing faintly, the lantern rested, its golden light steady and warm. The woman appeared by the cherry tree, her gaze calm and expectant. Ren stepped forward carefully. He reached into the frigid water, his fingers brushing against the smooth wooden frame. Lifting it slowly, he drew the lantern out of the pond. Though wet and worn by time, the flame within remained alive, flickering gently as though it had been waiting centuries just for this moment. The woman placed her hands together in a quiet gesture of thanks. Chapter 15 The Unspoken Prayer. When Ren set the lantern upon the snow, its glow expanded, casting light across the entire garden. For a moment, the snow seemed to turn into blossoms, each flake a petal drifting softly to the ground. The woman stepped closer. For the first time, she spoke clearly, her voice carrying both grief and peace. My prayer was never for myself, but for those I left behind. I wished for their happiness, though my own life could not hold it. The lantern carries not sorrow but love. Tears pricked Ren's eyes. He bowed deeply. Your prayer has endured. It has reached this moment, this place. It is not lost. She smiled faintly, her figure shimmering like snow touched by sunlight. The sorrow in her eyes seemed to ease, replaced by a quiet serenity. The lantern's glow grew brighter, enveloping her in golden warmth. Slowly, her form dissolved into the light, leaving only the falling snow behind. Chapter 16 The Garden Sleeps. Spring did not come immediately. The garden remained under snow for many more weeks, yet Ren felt a change in the air. The silence was no longer heavy with sorrow but alive with quiet peace. He tended the paths, swept the steps, and watched the pond with reverence. Sometimes, when the moonlight struck the frozen surface, he thought he saw the faint shimmer of a lantern's glow, but it no longer filled him with longing. Instead, it brought comfort, as if reminding him that love endures even through silence and snow. Master Jinan remarked one evening, "The garden has awakened from a long dream." And so have you, Ren. When the cherry blossoms finally bloomed, Ren stood beneath the tree where she had once appeared. Petals drifted upon the pond, floating gently on the thawed water. He bowed deeply, whispering a final prayer of gratitude. The garden, at last, slept in peace, not in sorrow, but in the gentle embrace of memory.